Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Today, we're going to be talking about price escalation, addenda, and multiple offer situations. Obviously, our market, has tons of multiple offer situations, and these are prominent. And, as we approach the spring, they're going to be more and more prevalent. So with that being the case, Kong put together a case study for us today of different scenarios. So he's going to take over and go over that information with us.
Thanks, Brooks. I did this case study and tried to incorporate a lot of things that we're seeing today and try to make these offers as close to one another as possible so that we can talk about it and just see how we would handle a situation like this. So the case study states that the house listed is $300,000, and we received the following 4 offers. Now, the seller is building a house, and it will settle at the end of June. So they will need to lease back or settle on the same day. They would prefer to settle on this home before buying their new home to get the cash out. The sellers are leaving the kitchen refrigerator, but they are taking the pellet stove because they can save $2,500 by moving the pellet stove to their new house as opposed to installing a new one. So let's look at the offers that we have in hand. So offer number 1, we have a right off the bat, they increased it by 10,000 to 310K. They have a escalation clause stating they'll pay up to $340,000, $1,000 higher than the offer. They'll get the deposit to us within 5 days of $3,000. The settlement date they have is at the end of April with a 10% down conventional mortgage, interest rate between 3.75 to 4.75. Their lender is a local bank. They do have an appraisal contingency with a $5,000 gap, meaning if it appraises at 305, they're willing to eat it at 310. Okay. They do want the refrigerator. They're willing to lease back for $50 a day for 62 days. And the buyer is willing to pay the 2% transfer tax. So they're willing to pay the seller side of the transfer tax. Okay. Offer number 2, we have $300,000. Their escalation says they're willing to pay up to $335,000, $5,000 higher than the next offer. They're going to give a $10,000 deposit within 2 days. Their settlement date is also end of April. 20% down conventional, 3.875 to 4% spread on the interest rate. And they are using a national bank. The appraisal contingency is there, but they are willing to pay a $15,000 difference between the two. If there is a shortage, up to $15,000. They waived the home inspection. They did ask for the pellet stove along with the refrigerator. And they are willing to lease back free to the seller for 62 days. Okay. Offer number 3 states that they're willing to pay $320,000 right off the bat. And there is no escalation clause. That is their best price that they're willing to offer. At the signing, they did turn in a $20,000 check to the list agent. So the list agent has the $20,000 in hand already. Settlement date is April 8th. They waived the mortgage contingency. They are asking for a 10-day, the home inspection to be done in 10 days. And the other agent, the buyer agent, did write in there that it's for informational purposes only, although it is elected. Items included, again, is the refrigerator. They are willing to lease back for 82 days to the seller at a rate of $33 a day. Now, there was no proof of funds for $320,000, but there was a pre-approval stating that these people are eligible for a loan. Okay. So offer number 4, we have $300,000. Their escalation states they're willing to pay up to $322 with a $2,500 difference. They're willing to give a $15,000 deposit within 5 days. Their settlement date isn't until the first week of May 6th. They are 5% down conventional with an interest rate between 4.25% to 5.25%. They're going to get a loan with a local credit union. And there is an appraisal contingency. So it does have to appraise for the either 300, between 300 to 322, wherever you end up. They are asking to do a home inspection within the first 5 days. And they did write in there that they would cover any single item up to $1,000. They did ask for the refrigerator. And they wrote in that they would be willing to give a free lease to the seller for 54 days. And also the buyer will pay the buyer agent commission of 2.5% of the 5. So with that, I had a few questions that I wrote down here. Hopefully we can answer this together. What is the highest escalated price between the 4 offers?
Number 1.
Yeah.
What is it?
340.
Nope.
Number 2, 325.
Nope. Number one is the highest.
336.
Your question was escalated price.
It only can go to 336, right?
Right.
Oh, you're asking, or you're asking what?
I'm sorry, the way
the
you're right, the way the
what
question
highest
was
escalate-
phrased.
What's
So
that?
what's the highest escalated price in comparison with all 4 offers?
Okay, that's a different question.
Right. So yeah, it is 336. Was that Sherry?
Yes, it was me.
Awesome. What offer will net the seller more on a buyer estimated cost sheet, or I'm sorry, a seller estimated cost sheet? Which of these 4 offers will net the seller the most money?
Number 1.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. The easiest way to do this is to do a seller's estimated cost sheet. Can you see this estimated seller's cost sheet?
Mhm.
Okay, so this is offer number 1, okay? 5% commission of 336, we determined that's the sales price for that contract. That's $16,800. The buyer is willing to pay the 2% transfer tax, so there is no transfer tax. Now, we did have to put back in for a seller expense of $50 a day lease back for 62 days, which is $3,100. Now, I did leave out the deed prep, overnight mail, stuff like that, because they're all going to be consistent with all 4 offers. So I just wanted to show you the differences between the 4 offers. So at 16,800 plus another $3,100, 50 times 62 was 3,100. You have 19,900. 336 minus 19,900 is 316,100. Okay, that's offer number 1. Offer number 2. 5% of 335, because now they're maxed out at their escalation clause, is $16,750. There is a 1% transfer tax to the seller, which is $3,350. Now, this was the offer that asked for the pellet stove. And if you recall, it will cost the seller $2,500 to replace it. So you have to put that back into consideration. You're left with a total selling expense of $22,600. $22,600 from 335, you're left with $312,400. Okay. Let's go to offer number 3. They capped out at 320. There was no escalation clause. That was their contract price was 320. 5% of that is 16,000. The seller pays the 1% transfer tax, which is 3,200. There is a $33 a day lease back for 82 days because they were settling really fast. And that totals 2,706. So you have a total selling expense of $21,906. 320 minus 21,906, you're left with 298.94. And then the last offer, we have a commission of only 2.5 because the buyer was willing to pay their buyer agent. So 2.5% of 322, you're at $8,050 for the commission. 1% transfer tax is $32.20. The total selling expense in this case then is $11,270. 322 minus 11,270, and you're left with 310,730. So the answer to the question that number 2, what offer will net the seller more on a seller estimated cost sheet? It's offer number 1. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that?
But in offer 1, I guess they have to consider what it would cost them to move twice.
Right.
Go back to offer number 1 up at the top. No, not the seller's cost sheet, the spreadsheet. It's also the one with the lowest deposit, right?
Yep. And that's one thing I do on my multiple summary sheet here. For example, I highlight the positives,
Mm-hmm.
just to help me see it easily. So question number 3, what does offer number 2 have to appraise for considering the gap of coverage?
320?
Was that Sherry again?
Yeah, 320?
Yep. Because they said, well, the maximum purchase price is now $335 and they're willing to cover $15,000. So it's 320. Okay. Question number 4, who has the best terms? What do you think, Tim?
Number 3.
What's your reasoning?
Just the $20,000 deposit.
Yeah.
The waiver of the mortgage doesn't mean a whole lot because you said they provided a pre-approval letter, which means they're probably getting a loan anyway.
Right.
But the $20,000 deposit, if they were to walk away with that contingency, to me means a lot because it's a $20,000 check to the seller.
Right.
But it all depends on how you're looking at it,
Exactly. Yeah, I have down in my notes, Tim, that this is really a judgment call.
Right.
What are you and the seller looking for? Are you looking for a clean deal that settles fast? Are you looking for the most money and the seller's willing to take a risk? What's their position? Because some of these deals have inspections, some of them don't. So it's a conversation that you have to sit there and talk with the seller and kind of navigate through this and maybe have to counter some of these offers to get them to the point where you like it more.
Right.
And a question on offer 3, if they truly are getting a mortgage, that's fairly quick to close in like 3.5 weeks. So if they can't, then that's 20 grand into the seller's pocket. They could then put the house back on the market and still have plenty of time to close by the end of June, I would think.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a very good thought process there, Sherry. I didn't even think of that.
But you also have a home inspection that you went through that you may have to disclose anything that came up on that inspection.
Right, Michelle. See, for informational purposes only, again, they did elect it, but I always, whenever I get those offers with that, I always call the buyer agent and say, if it's for buyer informational purpose, but it's elected, let's say you find a structural issue with the property, what are your buyers going to do? And most times they'll tell me, well, they're just going to back out. Well, that's not really for informational purposes only. That's just a home inspection, right? So, yeah, I do make that call just to find out what they're.
So member Kong, what you would advise is maybe to remove that and let them bring the home inspector through on one of their 2 walkthroughs.
Exactly.
That way it's not a contingency that they can walk away from. But if it's truly for informational purposes only, they can bring their inspector on one of their 2 walkthroughs.
Right. Would anybody here take offer number 2? Guess not. Okay. Number 5, which offer would you take at its face value as written with all these escalations and stuff taken into account? Sherry, sounds like you were already with 3, right?
No, I would take number 4.
Really?
Now,
Yep.
Kong, why would you take number 2? I mean, number 2.
I'm sorry, number 3, I mean.
I would take number 4.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What's your
Because-
reasoning?
They're giving the deposit check within 5 days. They're having inspections within 5 days. So they have 5 days for either. So if you don't get the money, the home goes back on the market. If they back out because of inspections within 5 days, the home goes back on the market. And they're basically getting the additional, what is it, $8,050 in paying the buyer's agent's commissions. And the net that I calculated is about $310, $730. They're doing a free lease back the whole way through June 30th, so they don't have to worry about moving twice. And even if it doesn't close by May 6th, I feel there's still plenty of time to put it back on the market and close by June 30th to meet their deadline.
Okay. Interesting. Would the higher interest rate on that one concern you over the other 2, though? Meaning maybe the buyer isn't credit worthy. That was one of the reasons I put in those varying interest rates too, was for us to look at as well, just to make a judgment call on that, or at least call their lender and say, how strong are these buyers, you know?
You know, on the flip side, you could look at that as they're being flexible, that if the rates get bumped this week and they haven't locked in yet, they're still locked into the contract.
Right.
You know, but when you go back to offer number 2 again, they waived inspections. They're willing to pay $335 with 20% down and the deposit in 2 days.
Right.
And a $15,000 gap and a free lease back. I mean, that's a pretty strong offer too, in my opinion.
Dave White, what would you do, sir?
You're putting me on the spot.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say the offer 4, with Sherry's reasoning, it seemed like it was a pretty good offer as well. And just considering the fact that they put so much, the deposit is so large deposit. So they have to have some, you know, reasonable confidence that they're going to get the financing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, offer 4 looks pretty good.
Yeah. Tim, you said you like offer number 2, right?
Yeah, just because they, you know, maybe it's not exactly the biggest net, but they've waived their inspection, so we've gotten rid of those contingencies.
Right.
They're 20% down. You know, they're free lease back to the seller and a $10,000 deposit in 2 days. And a $15,000 gap if there's an appraisal cut.
Right.
But if you look, the lease back isn't through the end of June, so they'll have to move somewhere for 30 days. Plus they want the pellet stove, which they're saying is worth 2,500. So I'm calculating that those two things are maybe worth about $5,000.
Yep. So my question number 6 was, what would you do with these 4 offers if they were in front of you? Brooks, what do you think you would do, bud?
Well, you gotta assess, like you talked about, a conversation with the sellers and find out their motivation and what they're ideally looking for. And then
Right.
if, you know, one of these doesn't exactly meet, you know, counter that one. You know, in the situation we were just talking about, offer number 2, maybe go back to the buyer's agent and say you have a deal. If you let us take the pellet stove and extend that free lease back till June 30th.
Right.
You take them one at a time, starting
Yep.
with the one that you feel comfortable with. And yeah, I mean, you have 2 options. You can go back and say, submit your highest and best, or you can take them one at a time and start countering. And if you don't get the terms that you're looking for, you go to the second one.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely entitled to counter. And Brooks, that's actually what I wrote down for what I would do, was negotiate with number 2,
Yeah,
try to
exactly.
get them to come up to a 340K price, get them to cover a $40,000 gap appraisal, leave the pellet stove, and then allow a 30-day lease. I know that's asking a lot, but you know, you never know until you ask, right? So, okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about then was the 4 check boxes on the escalation clause. You all can see that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have it highlighted because I still don't think a lot of people understand at least the 3rd checkbox. The first checkbox states the mortgage contingency is waived. The sale is not contingent on mortgage financing, although buyer may still get mortgage financing. That's pretty straightforward and clear. You're just waiving the mortgage contingency. If you want to have an appraisal contingency, you can check box number 4, section 4, right below the blue highlight there. An appraisal contingency addendum is attached. So you can do that. But one of these check boxes, one of these 4, maybe more than one checkbox, but you have to check at least one, okay? The next one states the loan amount stated in the mortgage contingency is increased by the amount necessary to keep the loan to value ratio the same as that set forth in the mortgage contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale, with the remainder paid in cash at settlement. So what that's stating is if you have a 20% down on the mortgage contingency on the original agreement of sale, and you just escalated 40,000, that means that you're going to bring 20% of the difference, and then the rest will be financed. Okay. It's to keep the mortgage contingency in line at whatever percentage, loan to value percentage you have down. So if you had down a 95%, that means then you have to come up with 5% of the difference. Okay. Does everybody understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one's the tricky one. The first blank of the difference. So it's talking about the difference between the original price and the new purchase price will be paid in cash at settlement. The remaining difference will be added to the loan amount. Okay. So let's look at offer number 2. Okay. Back to offer number 2. Remember, we were at $300,000 original price. They escalated to $335,000. So what is the difference? Anybody?
The 35,000.
Right. The difference is $35,000. Okay. let me just share this screen real quick. So again, 300,000 to 335 is a $35,000 difference. Okay. %20 down of 35,000 is $7,000. Correct? Now, in that contract, what did they say? They were willing to pay a $15,000 gap difference, correct?
Right.
So if I took the 7 that they're going to have to bring because they're putting 20% down, plus the $15,000 gap that they're willing to pay, 7,000 plus 15,000 is 22,000. So they put in there the first $22,000 of the difference between the original purchase price and the new purchase price will be paid in cash at settlement. The remaining difference will be added to the loan amount. So that's what that means. Does everybody kind of understand that?
Yeah.
So what's the remaining amount now? 35,000 minus 22,000 is what? 13,000?
Right.
That's the amount that's going to be financed that they talk about. The remaining difference will be added to the loan amount. So the $13,000 will be added to the loan amount. The other day, I sat with Diane Ramp and we went through a multiple offer and somebody actually filled that in. It was a $400,000 house and they were getting a 20% loan. And in that space, the other agent put down $5,000. Well, 20% of 400 grand, that's much more than 5,000.
Right.
Actually, the difference was like $70,000. They upped the escalation. So 70,000 times 20%, that's like 14,000. And he only had $5,000 in there. So that was not filled out properly. Okay.
Okay.
The last box, I just get back here. Within blank days of the execution date of the agreement, buyer will deliver to seller a written pre-approval letter from the lender identified in the mortgage contingency paragraph for an amount equal to or greater than the increased loan amount. If buyer fails to provide written pre-approval within the stated time period, seller may terminate the agreement in writing. I don't think I've ever seen that box check marked. That should all be done ahead of time before you present the offer. And certainly, hopefully the buyer is pre-approved for the escalated amount, the maximum escalated amount that they had written. So rarely do you ever see that. That probably should never be used because that's really a red flag that you're just delaying things there. So, but any questions on anything that we went over this morning? I know that's a lot of numbers, but if you have questions, now's the time to ask.
Yeah, I have a real quick question. The second and third boxes, that third box really is only checked if there's a gap, correct?
Yes, or here's the situation. You can check mark that box and put in a number, okay, that the buyer is willing to bring. But you can also check mark box number 4 that it still has to appraise for the sales price. So as a list agent, when we're sitting with our clients, we have to look at all these addendums because remember, addendums supersede the agreement of sale.
Right.
You have to sit down and kind of narrow it down so that it doesn't contradict each other. So in this case, if they do attach an appraisal contingency for 335 with a $15,000 gap, then they really should give you a appraisal contingency that states the house only has to appraise for 320.
Okay, to support the gap
Right.
that they're, okay.
Correct. But if they check mark that an appraisal contingency addendum is attached and they give it to you and the box is blank and it says that it has to appraise at the sales price or greater, then you're stuck with having to go back again to an appraisal contingency, a full appraisal contingency.
Right.
How about it, Tim? We just had that recently on a deal.
Right.
Where the appraisal contingency contradicts what was written on the agreement of sale of a gap coverage.
Hey, Kong, I have a question on
Yeah. Hi, Morgan.
Hey, so on an appraisal gap, so like I'm getting a lot of those now, I mean, on every deal. And some of these are pretty significant, or like if I write one, you know, $50,000 appraisal gap, are you getting proof of funds for that with your so like they have a pre-approval for a mortgage, you know, for X amount, but then they have an appraisal gap of, you know, $50,000 on it. Do you request that, or do you, because obviously like they're probably putting a large deposit down too in this circumstance, so
right,
do you like, how do you handle that? I'm just curious what people are doing. I've submitted them with mine, but I don't always, for like a 10,000 or, you know, smaller gaps, I don't always request the proof of funds for it, but I'm just curious like what people are doing on that.
Yeah, I wrote an offer this past weekend and I did include like a screenshot of a 401k account.
Right.
That you can easily access. It just depends on the significance of it, right? How much it is. If we're talking like a $30,000-$40,000 gap difference, obviously you kind of want to see some kind of proof of funds.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a
yeah.
I
mean, I feel
idea.
like I submit them to other people like when I'm writing, but when I get them, I don't know if I've had one on any of my listings that's been like more than like, you know, 10 or 20,000. But I've like, on the other hand, I've like submitted offers with a 50,000 or more. So I've submitted that, but I was just curious if like that's becoming more of a thing or if people are doing that. I don't know.
Right. No, it's very good practice to do so and to ask for it. Right.
I think the more ammunition you have in your toolbox to try to get your offer approved, the better.
Yep.
This is Sherry. I just had a quick question back on
Sherry.
the escalation addendum. I know you went over this maybe a month or two ago.
Yeah.
Paragraph 2. So it's what the true net means. So in our two situations, one's willing to pay transfer tax, one's willing to pay commissions, but they're buyer concessions and not seller concessions, right? Do they play into that at all?
No, seller concession is, to me, concession means give up. So what did the seller give up? The seller didn't give up paying transfer tax or commission. You know, it's the buyer that offered it up.
Okay, because I know that was a discussion a while ago and it was very confusing as to what the true escalation amount was.
Right.
Based upon how the offer was written. And I couldn't remember the situation.
Yeah, and actually they kind of tried to pinpoint down what the net is. So they have in parentheses now, the purchase price less any identified seller assist and seller financial concessions. So anything they conceded financially.
Okay, thanks.
And another question that came up a while back too, Tim, are you allowed to compare escalation clauses to escalation clauses? Yes, you are absolutely allowed to. And it's in paragraph 2 in the bold. If one or more competing offers include similar price escalation terms, this automatic increase will be applied to the maximum escalated sales price of the highest competing escalation term, not to exceed the maximum purchase price stated above. So that gives you the right to compare escalation clauses.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No, I think this was a good meeting, guys. Thank you for sharing it. Hopefully we can get everybody who wasn't able to attend it to watch this video. I know we get a lot of calls on a daily basis of agents that are confused about figuring out what the highest and best offer is. And, you know, please continue to call us if you have any questions. Kong and Brooks are really good at both of this. Both of them are really good at figuring these things out. So if you need a little assistance or want to roll something off their back, just please reach out and give us a call. Again, thank you, Kong, for putting all this time into it and the examples. I think you did a great job. Thank you, Brooks, for coordinating it and having another good subject. What do we have on the agenda for next week?
I've got a couple of topics lined up. Haven't picked one yet, but I'll push that out here later this week.
All right, sounds good.
Also,
Anybody else?
Tim, don't forget Thursday, 9:30, instead of role play, we're going to stop role play for a little bit. We're going to do a 7-week series on the agreement of sale. We're going to dive into it, read it, talk about it 2 pages at a time for 7 weeks. So that's Thursday at 9:30.
Good. Thank you very much for that, Kong. Question, I see. Yes, Kara? Unmute.
Bear with me. Okay. Hi. Okay. That training on Thursday, are you going to be able to video those and keep that so that we can use
we
it?
can do that.
That'd be great. Yeah, I think that's very beneficial. Thank you.
Yep.
Are you doing that in person, Kong, or Zoom too?
Zoom.
Okay, so Zoom, and we'll record it and then we'll send it out.
Yep.
Okay, good. Good idea, Kara.
Thanks, Kara.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up? If not, we'll close it out. Again, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week.